The arteries supplying blood to your penis are between 1 and 1.5 millimeters in diameter. I want you to hold that number for a moment, because everything I am about to tell you depends on understanding what that measurement means for your body. For comparison, the arteries feeding your heart are 10 times wider. The arteries supplying your kidneys are wider still. And the arteries in your legs, the ones doctors worry about when they talk about peripheral vascular disease, are wider than all of them. The penile arteries are, by a significant margin, among the smallest functional arteries in the entire human body. And that single anatomical fact explains something that has probably been frustrating you for years. Not months. Years. It explains why you have tried things that worked for other men and felt almost nothing. It explains why you went through a period where something seemed to be helping and then quietly stopped. It explains why the advice you have been given, eat better, exercise more, try this supplement, drink that juice, has delivered results that feel insultingly small compared to the problem you are actually facing. You have been applying large artery solutions to a small artery problem. And the biology was never going to cooperate with that approach, no matter how disciplined you were, no matter how consistently you tried. But here is what that same measurement tells me as a urologist, and what I want you to understand before we go any further. The reason these arteries fail fastest is the exact same reason they can recover fastest. If you understand the specific mechanism operating at that scale, and if you address it completely rather than partially. I am Dr. Mei Anderson. I am a urologist specializing in senior men's sexual health, and I have spent over 20 years in clinical practice watching men over 60 try one thing at a time when their body needed 3 things simultaneously. What I am going to show you today is not a new ingredient. It is a new map. And once you have it, every single thing that has not worked for you will make perfect sense. Before we go further, if you are watching this on Vital Health Seniors for the first time, subscribe now and turn on notifications. I publish 1 video per week, and I build every one of them on the same principle. Complete mechanisms, not partial answers. If this video gives you something you have genuinely never heard before, that is what the entire channel is built to do. Now let me show you what I mean. I want to ask you something directly. How many times have you tried something for your erections? A supplement, a dietary change, a specific food or drink, felt some early encouragement, and then watched it fade? And then told yourself it probably wasn't strong enough, or you didn't take enough, or you weren't consistent enough. If that pattern sounds familiar, I want you to type the number 1 in the comments right now. Because what I am about to explain will reframe every one of those experiences, and the men in these comments saying the same thing may be the most valuable thing you take from this video. Here is the framework I use when I am sitting with a patient who has tried everything and nothing has held. Penile arterial function, the mechanism that allows an erection to occur and be maintained, has 3 separate failure points. Not 1, 3. And they operate independently of each other, which means fixing one of them while the other 2 remain broken produces results that feel real for a short time, and then disappear. This is not your body resisting you. This is incomplete engineering producing a predictable mechanical outcome. I call these the 3 locks. And the reason almost every solution on the market, and almost every video on this topic, leaves men frustrated is simple. They hand you 1 key. Your body needs 3. Lock 1 is production. This is where almost all the attention goes. How much nitric oxide your body is generating. Nitric oxide is the signaling molecule that tells the smooth muscle in your arterial walls to relax and allow blood to surge through. When production is insufficient, the arteries don't open fully. This is the lock most supplements, most juices, most dietary recommendations are trying to address. And they are not wrong. It is a real problem. But it is 1 lock of 3. Lock 2 is destruction. This is the one almost nobody explains, and it is the reason progress disappears. Your body produces an enzyme called phosphodiesterase type 5, PDE5, whose specific job is to break down cyclic GMP, the molecule that carries the nitric oxide signal to your arterial smooth muscle. The moment nitric oxide triggers that signal, PDE5 begins destroying it. It is relentless and it does not stop. Which means that if you are increasing production through lock 1 while PDE5 is working at full capacity through lock 2, You are pouring water into a bucket with a large hole in the bottom. You might see the level rise briefly, then it falls. This is not failure. This is physics. Lock 3 is delivery. And this is the one that stops men cold when I explain it in clinic, because it means that even when nitric oxide is present and intact, even when both lock 1 and lock 2 are being addressed, the blood itself may not physically be able to reach those 1.5 millimeter arteries at sufficient pressure and volume to produce a strong, reliable erection. Blood is not a simple liquid. Its thickness, its tendency to clump, the ability of red blood cells to deform and navigate microvascular channels. These are variables. They degrade after 60. Platelet aggregation increases. Blood viscosity rises. The mechanical capacity of blood to move through the smallest arterial passages in your body deteriorates in ways that have nothing to do with nitric oxide whatsoever. And no amount of production or preservation solves a delivery problem. 3 locks. Most men are working on 1. The combination approach that I am going to walk you through today is not more of the same logic applied harder. It is a different category of solution. And the reason men who do this correctly describe results they call unbelievable is not because of any single ingredient. It is because for the first time, they are addressing all 3 failure points simultaneously. Biology responds to correct inputs. That is not remarkable. That is predictable. Let me take you through each lock in detail, because understanding the mechanism is what makes the difference between following instructions and making intelligent decisions about your own body. Lock 1. Production. Your body actually has 2 completely independent pathways for producing nitric oxide. Most men, and most health content, operates as though there is only one. The first is the endothelial pathway. Your blood vessel walls are lined with cells called endothelial cells, and they contain an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase that converts an amino acid called arginine into nitric oxide. This is the pathway that most supplements, L-arginine, L-citrulline, many herbal compounds, are attempting to support. And it works reasonably well in younger men whose endothelial cells are healthy and responsive. After 60, this pathway degrades. Endothelial function declines with age, with chronic inflammation, with oxidative stress, and with the accumulation of cardiovascular risk factors that most men carry by the time they reach their 60s. The enzyme becomes less efficient. The pathway produces less. And because this is the pathway almost all interventions target, men over 60 find themselves pushing harder and harder on a door that is getting progressively stiffer. The second pathway is entirely different. It is called the nitrate pathway, and critically, it bypasses the endothelium completely. When you consume foods rich in inorganic dietary nitrates, beetroot, arugula, celery, spinach, those nitrates are absorbed into your bloodstream and circulated to your salivary glands, where they are secreted back into your saliva at concentrated levels. The bacteria living on the surface and back of your tongue then convert those nitrates into nitrites, using enzymes called nitrate reductases. Those nitrites are swallowed, and in the acidic environment of your stomach, they are converted into nitric oxide through a chemical process that has nothing to do with your endothelial cells and nothing to do with how well your blood vessels are aging. This pathway remains functional regardless of endothelial decline. It does not care how old you are. It does not care about your cardiovascular history. It is an entirely separate biological route to the same destination. Now here is something that stops men completely when I tell them. This pathway, your most reliable remaining route to nitric oxide production after 60, depends entirely on the bacteria in your mouth. If those bacteria are not present, or not functioning, the nitrate to nitrite conversion does not happen. The nitrates simply pass through you unused. Antibacterial mouthwash kills those bacteria thoroughly and efficiently. And a significant proportion of men over 60 use antibacterial mouthwash every single day, often twice a day, because they were told it is good oral hygiene practice. They are, without knowing it, disabling their most resilient nitric oxide pathway every morning before breakfast. This is not a minor issue. Studies have shown that using antibacterial mouthwash can reduce nitric oxide availability from dietary nitrates by more than 60%. I will come back to what to do about this at the end, but hold that number. To optimize lock 1, you want to be feeding the nitrate pathway with the highest concentration sources. Arugula contains more dietary nitrates per gram than any other commonly consumed vegetable, higher than beetroot, higher than celery. You want to combine those sources with adequate stomach acidity to facilitate the final nitrite to nitric oxide conversion, which is where fresh lemon juice, rich in citric acid, becomes a functional addition rather than a flavor choice. And you want vitamin C present, because ascorbic acid acts as a reducing agent that catalyses the conversion reaction, producing more nitric oxide from the same amount of dietary nitrate. But you can produce all the nitric oxide in the world and still feel almost nothing if lock 2 is fully open. PDE5 works continuously. Every molecule of cyclic GMP your nitric oxide produces is being targeted for destruction the moment it appears. The pharmaceutical treatments for erectile dysfunction, the medications most men know by name, work by blocking PDE5 directly and powerfully. But natural compounds can inhibit the same enzyme, and here is where the mechanism becomes genuinely important to understand. The flavonols in raw cacao, particularly a compound called epicatechin, inhibit PDE5. The elagitannins in pomegranate inhibit PDE5 through a different molecular binding mechanism. The proanthocyanidins in pine bark extract inhibit PDE5 through yet another distinct mechanism. When you combine compounds that inhibit the same enzyme through different mechanisms simultaneously, the inhibitory effect is not simply additive. It is multiplicative. Each compound is blocking a different part of the same destructive process, and the combined result is a level of PDE5 inhibition that no single natural compound could produce alone. This is not folk medicine. This is basic pharmacological logic applied to natural compounds. You are simultaneously pressing on multiple brakes on the same destruction pathway. Cyclic GMP accumulates to higher levels. The arterial smooth muscle receives a stronger, more sustained signal to relax. The door that nitric oxide has been knocking on stays open longer. There is also a second dimension to lock 2 that operates through oxidative stress. Free radicals actively destroy nitric oxide molecules in the bloodstream before they can reach their target tissues. This is why antioxidants are not incidental to this process. They are structural. Vitamin C does not just catalyze nitrite conversion. It physically intercepts free radicals that would otherwise eliminate the nitric oxide you have just produced. The antioxidant function is protective, not supplementary. Lock 2, addressed properly, turns a short and unreliable signal into one that is sustained and powerful. But if the blood carrying that signal cannot physically navigate the 1.5 millimeter passages at the end of the journey, you still arrive at the same disappointing destination. Lock 3 is the delivery problem, and it requires understanding something most men have never heard of in relation to their sexual health. The word is hemorrheology. It refers to the science of how blood flows, its viscosity, its resistance, its mechanical behavior inside small vessels. After 60, several changes in blood properties converge. Platelet aggregation, the tendency of blood cells to clump together, increases. Blood viscosity rises, making it physically thicker and more resistant to movement. And erythrocyte deformability, the ability of individual red blood cells to change shape and squeeze through microvascular channels, decreases. Red blood cells are not rigid. In healthy younger men, they deform easily to navigate narrow passages. With age and inflammation, they become stiffer. And in a 1.5 millimeter artery, the difference between blood that flows freely and blood that moves sluggishly is the difference between a full erection and a partial one. The omega-3 fatty acids found in oily fish and algae-based sources address this through 2 separate mechanisms. They reduce platelet aggregation and they directly increase erythrocyte deformability by incorporating into red blood cell membranes and restoring their flexibility. Ginger's active compounds, the gingerols and shogales, independently inhibit platelet aggregation through a different biological pathway, providing an additional anti-clumping effect that compounds with the omega-3 action. And nattokinase, an enzyme derived from fermented soy, acts as what researchers call a fibrinolytic agent, breaking down fibrin, the protein mesh that contributes to blood viscosity at the cellular level. These 3 compounds, working on the delivery layer simultaneously, mean that when the arterial signal is sent and the vessels dilate, the blood that arrives is blood that can actually move through the passages it needs to reach. Lock 3, addressed properly, is the difference between a wide-open door and something that can walk through it. Now I need to tell you something about timing, because this is where the framework moves from understanding to strategy, and it is the part of this video that I think will genuinely change how you approach this. The 3 locks do not peak at the same time, and taking the right things in the wrong sequence is meaningfully less effective than taking them in the right sequence. Here is the biology. Nitric oxide from dietary nitrates typically peaks in the bloodstream approximately 2 to 3 hours after consumption. The PDE5 inhibitory effects of flavanol compounds peak later, closer to 3 to 4 hours after consumption. The blood viscosity modifications from omega-3s and ginger operate over a much longer window, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours after a sustained daily dose. What this means in practical terms is that if you consume everything at the same moment, the peaks do not align. Your delivery layer may not be optimized when your production peaks. Your PDE5 inhibition may not be at maximum when your nitric oxide is highest. You are playing the right notes but not at the same time. The intelligent approach is to address lock 3 first, the delivery layer through omega-3s and ginger, as a morning baseline dose that builds across the day. Lock 1 and Lock 2 come together, timed so that the production peak and the preservation peak arrive simultaneously, in the early evening or roughly 90 minutes before you anticipate wanting them to be active. This is not overcomplicated. It is 2 doses at 2 times of day, but the difference between timed synergy and random co-ingestion is measurable in the strength and reliability of the result. And there is one more layer that makes everything I have described work faster and hold longer. Sleep. Nocturnal penile tumescence, the biological process behind nighttime and early morning erections, is not a side effect of dreaming. It is scheduled vascular maintenance. During slow-wave deep sleep, your body uses those repeated cycles of arterial dilation and blood engorgement to preserve the elasticity of penile arterial walls, maintain endothelial cell health, and rehearse the exact same pathways you are working to restore through the 3-lock approach. Without this nightly maintenance cycle, arterial wall integrity degrades progressively, and the gains you make during waking hours are partially undone each night. Men over 60 lose deep sleep architecture before they lose almost anything else. Cortisol dysregulation, blood sugar instability, and micronutrient depletion, particularly magnesium, all fragment slow-wave sleep in ways that accelerate vascular decline specifically. This is why magnesium glycinate taken before bed is not a general wellness recommendation in this context. It is a targeted intervention to restore the sleep architecture that enables your body to do its own maintenance work. When slow-wave sleep is protected, the nocturnal maintenance cycles resume. Morning erections, which most men write off as a thing of the past, begin returning. And their return is not a coincidence. It is confirmation that the arterial tissue is beginning to recover its function. If you are finding this useful and you are not yet subscribed to Vital Health Seniors, this is the moment I would ask you to subscribe. Every video on this channel is built exactly like this one. Not a single ingredient and a hope, but a complete mechanism explained in a way that lets you make real decisions about your own body. The next video will go deeper into one specific aspect of what we have covered today, and if you are not subscribed, you will not see it. Let me tell you what this looks like over time, because I want to be honest about the timeline rather than give you unrealistic expectations that lead to the same frustration you have already experienced. In the first 3 days, most men notice something they are almost reluctant to mention because it seems too small to be significant. Warmth. Warmth in the hands and feet that was not there before. A slightly less heavy feeling in the lower body in the morning. This is not imagination. This is the delivery layer, Lock 3, beginning to change the mechanical properties of blood in peripheral vessels. It is real and it is measurable even though it is subtle. In the first week, sleep quality typically shifts before anything else. Men who have not had a single uninterrupted night of deep sleep in years begin waking up having actually rested. This is the magnesium component doing its primary work on slow-wave architecture. The cortisol rhythm begins stabilizing. the body stops spending all night in a shallow, alert state and begins, for the first time in perhaps years, actually repairing itself. Between days 7 and 14, the production and preservation layers are building. PDE5 inhibition is becoming consistent across the day. Nitric oxide production through the nitrate pathway is increasing as dietary patterns adapt. Men begin reporting mental clarity that surprises them, because the same arterial network that supplies the penis supplies the brain, and improved microvascular circulation affects cognition before it affects erections in most cases. Sharper mornings, less afternoon fog, a sense of being present in the body, rather than observing it from a slight distance. In weeks 2 to 3, the erection changes begin. Not dramatically, not all at once. But men notice that the morning erection, absent for sometimes years, has returned. Faint at first, then stronger across subsequent mornings. They notice that the response to arousal is faster and more reliable than it has been. They notice that the erection, when it arrives, has a quality they recognize from much earlier in their lives: fullness, firmness, duration. These are not the results of a single ingredient working harder. These are the results of 3 independent mechanisms finally aligned and working simultaneously. By the end of 30 days, the endothelial pathway, the one that declined with age and was the source of so much frustration, has begun partially recovering. Not because anything forced it to, because the nitrate pathway took over the load long enough for endothelial cells to rest, reduce their inflammatory burden, and begin regenerating function. Lock 1 is now producing from both pathways. The bucket no longer has the same size hole. The delivery layer has been consistently protecting the integrity of the blood arriving at the destination. And the body is performing its own maintenance work every night in sleep rather than degrading through it. What men describe at 30 days is not a treatment effect. It is a system coming back online. I want to speak to you directly now, not as a clinician, but as someone who has sat with hundreds of men who came into my office carrying something they could not name out loud. The shame of this is real. I am not going to pretend otherwise. There is something about this particular loss that goes deeper than physical function. It touches identity. It touches the feeling of being capable, of being present in your body, of being a man in the way you have always understood that to mean. And when it starts slipping, quietly over months and years, without any clear moment you can point to, it can feel like you are disappearing from yourself without knowing how to stop it. I want you to hear this clearly. You did not fail. The map you were given was incomplete. Every single thing you tried addressed one part of a 3-part problem, and the biology was never going to cooperate with that approach no matter how hard you pushed. That is not weakness. That is an engineering problem with a solvable answer. The men I have watched come back, and I have watched many of them, do not come back because they finally found the right ingredient. They come back because they finally understood the whole system. And once you understand a system, you stop being a passive recipient of its failures, and start being someone who can intervene intelligently. That shift, from patient to operator of your own biology, is worth more than any single compound I could name. You are not running out of time. You are not past the point where this matters. The 1.5 millimeter arteries we started with are the same arteries that respond fastest to a complete and correctly sequenced approach, for exactly the same reason they failed first. Their small diameter makes them acutely sensitive to everything, including recovery. One thing I want you to do tonight. Just one. Before you go to sleep, decide whether you are going to use antibacterial mouthwash tomorrow morning before eating, or drinking anything containing dietary nitrates. If the answer has been yes, every day without question because someone told you it was good hygiene, change it tomorrow. Rinse with water. Brush with toothpaste. Leave the bacteria on your tongue alive. They are not a contamination. They are a required biological step in the most resilient nitric oxide pathway your body still has. And you may have been disabling that pathway every single morning for years. That one change costs nothing. It requires no purchase, no preparation, no difficult commitment. And it is attached to a mechanism you now understand, which means it will not feel arbitrary. It will feel like using knowledge you earned by sitting here for the last 30 minutes. Share this video with one man you know who has been trying things that aren't working. Not because I am asking you to share it. Because that man has a 3-lock problem, and he thinks he has a single ingredient problem. And the difference between those two frames is the difference between years more frustration, and a path that actually makes biological sense. The comment you leave here, telling me which lock you think has been your biggest obstacle, 1, 2, or 3, might be the sentence that makes another man realize he is not alone and not broken. I will see you in the next video. And I have to tell you, if what we covered today gave you a new way of understanding your body, the next video will make this one look like the introduction. We are going to look at exactly why two men can follow the identical protocol and get dramatically different results, and the single hidden variable that explains the gap. It has nothing to do with what they take. It has everything to do with something happening inside their cells that almost no one is measuring, and almost no one is talking about. If you are not subscribed, you will not see it. If you are, I will see you there.